Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In the previous episode, we started to discuss the Polish hero of the American Revolutionary War, Casimir Pulaski, and how he found himself in America. In this episode, we will look into how he is remembered in the United States, but also examine the political environment he found himself in after arriving in the New World.
I wouldn't be the first person to feel a connection because of Pulaski. And I think a lot of Americans, not just Polish Americans, feel that he is a very important figure. And they just got used to living with his name. If you go to Savannah, there is the Pulaski Oak in Savannah. And there's also Fort Pulaski, which is one of the old forts, very important in the Civil War, the American Civil War. There is, which I went to as a young kid. Oh, Pulaski, he was a famous general because we didn't used to, before identity politics, make such a big deal about somebody's last name. You never thought about it. You're Americans. Yeah. And everybody, has different last names.
Going just to his particular military activity, Pulaski got off to quite a good start.
Yeah.
In one of his operations, when he was credited with credited with saving the life of George Washington.
Brandywine Hill.
And
Battle of Brandywine
Hill. And he was
Hill.
credited with actually being responsible for George Washington surviving escaping safely.
What happened at Brandywine Hill was, and that's exactly right, another reason that's the reason why that we might not have had a successful revolution. If Franklin had not met, you see how tenuous history is.
Exactly.
So much of luck is involved. If Franklin hadn't convinced him, if they hadn't met, and then Franklin hadn't convinced Pulaski to go to the United States and use his formidable skills, this is how intelligent Franklin was. He said, boy, we're going to need him. This guy is really going to be useful. We can't afford to let him get away. So Franklin used all of his charm, which was formidable, and intelligence, and wining and dining in Paris to get Pulaski to go. And the result was that in the Battle of Brandywine Hill, when the British were about to outflank Washington's troops, foot soldiers, Pulaski, who was not even commissioned yet.
He hadn't been named. He was commissioned slightly later. Yes.
He was commissioned as a result. They rushed it through. They said, "Oh boy, we don't lose this guy." What were we waiting for?
Exactly.
Because the commission had to be approved by the entire Congress. You see. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was hard to get Congress, they had a lot of papers they were going through, and also wondering if they were going to get their heads cut off at any time in the near future. Wholesale guillotining. But actually, they wouldn't have used the guillotine. That was the French.
The British just hung them,
lined them up. So hang together, hang separately. I believe it was
the famous.
Was it John Hancock who
John
said that?
Hancock, I think.
I believe it was. Who also signed the biggest signature on the Declaration of Independence. He said, "Well, I wanted to be able to read my name." These were formidable people. These were not weeping millennials.
No, it was an immensely. I find that period of American history from the end of the War of Independence, or even during the War of Independence, but to the. I'm
teasing you millennials. I'm just teasing you.
At least until 1787, the writing of the Constitution, a marvellously interesting period of history, and some very talented and very far-sighted men, and they were men in those days, who were able to drop this Constitution, which of course is still in use today.
Yeah.
And really, that generation of American leaders, I think, was just immensely talented.
Well, yeah, and they attracted talent, as we see
with these two great Polish freedom fighters.
Well, they said, "Oh boy, we'll have a little bit of that," because that's amazing. Because freedom, Polish freedom. Poland had a huge empire, and now it has shrunk to virtually nothing. With the third partition, it was over 1795.
1795, yes.
Yeah, and but the first and second partitions had already chased them out. I believe it was the second one had already happened too, and then it just took some time for the final erasure of Poland.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to have to stop you there, but we'll be back for another episode. Don't panic. As usual, the clock's defeated us. There's a lot more to hear about these two amazing characters. So do join us again on the next episode of Poland Daily History.